Welcome to the SAFeTy Chronicles, exploring how to keep people and pets safe from the cycle of interpersonal violence. I am your host, Allie Phillips, founder and CEO of Sheltering Animals and Families Together, the SAFeTy Program, a nonprofit organization working with domestic violence shelters to eliminate the pet housing barrier to safety. As the founder, I have led the global movement in helping domestic violence shelters create on-site pet housing while elevating the criminal justice response to how animal abuse links to crimes against people. I am a former prosecuting attorney, internationally recognized legal expert and public speaker, award-winning author, and advocate for protecting vulnerable victims. In this podcast, we will explore how and why animals are harmed in the cycle of family violence and the human-animal bond that keeps victims in harm's way with their pets. Guest speakers and I will share strategies for shelters and professionals working to safeguard survivors, why pet-inclusive sheltering is life-saving, and safety tips for those who need help. None of the content will be graphic. If you are in harm's way, please contact your nearest domestic violence shelter or call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. Let's get started. Hey everybody, welcome back to the next episode of the SAFeTy Chronicles, and I've got a treat for you. I've got a treat. So I am pleased to have Amy Bogardus from the Empire Justice Center of New York here with us today, and she's a regional attorney coordinator. And before we dive into our topic and why I wanted to have this conversation with you today, would you just tell us about you and your work and, how you got into the field of really being interested of how animal abuse links to family violence.
Sure, thank you. So I'm Amy Bogardus. I use she, her pronouns. My legal background came mostly from criminal law before I got involved with Empire Justice Center. I'm a former prosecutor with Monroe County, New York, their district attorney's office, where I had litigation and appellate background. And then from that employment opportunity, I then went back to the appellate division 4th department, where I was an appellate court attorney for about 14 years, doing a lot of objective analyzing, preparing reports, recommendations for the court on family, civil, and criminal cases. And then this opportunity came to join Empire Justice Center, and I jumped at it. I've always been in public service, and I wanted to be able to use the skills that I had acquired through my career to help crime victims, help populations here in New York who have been marginalized. And so how I discovered and learned more about this topic of the intersection between animal abuse and domestic violence was, I have to be honest, there were a lot of areas of knowledge that I needed to develop. And one of them was trying to understand more about the barriers that domestic violence victims experience every day. And one of those and the topics that I was learning about was pet abuse and domestic violence. And I wanted to try to understand more for myself and also cultivate information for other individuals to explain why that attachment, that love, that bond is so important to a victim. And that was the catalyst for this article.
So how many four-legged family members do you have?
I currently have one four-legged member of our family. She is a puppy and delightful beyond belief. And then we previously had a furry member of our family for 16 and a half years, passed on the beginning of the year. And I know the depth of love that I have for those furry little delightful beings. And I wanted to try to help others who may not understand that bond figure out and learn why it needs to be respected and how to be empathetic in your mindset with working with victims who have animals.
Well, first of all, I love that you're a former prosecutor. Same here. You know, we are a very unique breed in the legal world. And to find another prosecutor mind who is interested in this topic is very rare. There are very few of us who understand it, are educated in it, are skilled in it, and can help others with it. So yeah, you are in a very small flock of prosecutors who really understand the link.
Be part of that group, and hopefully we can make it bigger.
Yes, exactly. I mean, that's certainly been my career focus for the last 20 years, doing that. And so when I ran across your article, this is really what I want to talk about with you. So folks, I ran across this article. It was published last December 2022, and it's called "What Lawyers Can Do When Pet Abuse and Domestic Violence Intersect." And when I saw this, and I immediately go to credentials. That's the first thing that I do. Like, okay, who's writing about this topic? Do they actually know what they're talking about? And I read your credentials and I'm like, I need to talk with her. I need to get to know this person. Because like I said, there's very few of us in this field. So I'm going to put a link to the article below, you know, for those who are watching, so that they can read it, because it's a real easy, clear, concise read. But I want to ask you, why did you feel compelled to write this article?
Oh, thank you for that question. Because I can speak for a long time about that, but I'll just sum it up as this, is that as I was saying before, wanting to understand about the barriers. And also I wanted to provide information to someone who may not necessarily acknowledge, accept, or respect the bond between humans and animals, and to help that individual develop an empathetic mindset so that they can ask the right questions and provide tools to their clients, and realize that there's a lot of ways that you can help crime victims. And in New York, we have many different legal tools that a lot of people don't necessarily are aware of, or perhaps don't think that they can access. And I wanted to demystify all of that and make it easier for people to see the big picture and how they have a role in that big picture.
Mm-hmm. So can you talk about a couple of those tools that you have in New York, because they may be in other states, and it may actually prompt somebody to go searching in their state and in their jurisdiction to see, you know, hey, do we have this? So
yeah,
I
would be more than happy to. I think one of the first things, though, that I wanted to stress, at least in the article as I did, is asking the questions. How do you find out whether or not there's an animal in the crime victim's environment? And that's huge, because that might not be something that they will initially disclose, or they don't realize how it's part of their victimization. And so in the article, I recommend asking just a few questions in your intake interview. And the big thing is just asking them an open-ended question. And that open-ended question is, do you live or reside with an animal? So once you discover that there is an animal in the environment, then you can ask more deeper questions to try to expose if there's victimization, and then utilize the tools that exist in your state. So for New York, one of the tools that we have is the order of protection that will encompass what New York references as a companion animal or a pet. And in New York, the level of protection for an animal is based on their legal classification. So in New York, a pet and companion animal are interchangeable terminology. So with the order of protection, an animal can be incorporated, but you have to know about them. You have to know that they exist. So you have to ask those questions. And it's not hard to add that condition to an order of protection in New York, but you just have to ask and also provide information to persuade the court that this animal needs protecting and can be a tool of control, and how an abuser can use that animal to continue to perpetuate harm to the victim as well as to the animal.
So New York was one of the early states that enacted what we call pet protective order legislation. The New England states were very progressive in getting that movement started. And, one thing that I've always said, because I do a lot of criminal justice training, is it kind of like what you said, like you have to ask the question. And the pet protective orders prompt the judge or the magistrate to ask the question. And because even if a state doesn't have a pet protective order, which at this point I'm drawing a blank, but I want to say about 40 states actually have a law in place. But the other states that don't, the judge can still protect the animal, because animals, whether we like it or not, are still deemed property under the laws of every state in the United States. And there's always a property line item. And a crime victim, a domestic violence victim, is never going to ask for a refrigerator to be protected. Maybe a home, maybe a car, but that's where you can put in the pet. But it doesn't prompt the judge to think pets. And that's why, these laws prompt the judge to ask the question, just like what you said. You have to ask the question and then you get the information. So, so that I'm a big advocate for those pet protective order laws, and making sure that people know about that, that they can ask, making sure that the police officers know about it, all the first responders know about it, everybody should know whether their state has this. So that's fantastic. Now, what are some other tools that you have?
Well, there is another tool that is relatively more recent, and one that I was surprised to discover was recent. In February of 2022, New York established and empowered veterinarians to be mandatory reporters if they had reasonable belief that a companion animal was being abused. I thought that since New York was extremely progressive, that component might have already been in place. I'm pleased that it is now, because veterinarians play an important part of the collaborative efforts to create a safety net for protecting domestic violence victims and animals. It's quite possible that a domestic violence victim may feel compelled, and hopefully, to help their animal, whereas they may not be at the point where they're able to ask for help for themselves. And if you're seeing an animal being abused or harmed, as because of the link, that scenario probably means somebody else in the house is being abused, whether it's domestic violence, whether it's child abuse, whether it's other animals. And we all have a role to put it on our radar and do what we can to try to utilize the tools that exist in your own states or here in New York to help.
So that is such an important issue. That could be a podcast on its own, and it probably should be, because veterinarians are typically the first ones to see if an animal is being neglected, is being maltreated. And for years, we have heard from the veterinary field that they are hesitant to respond. And what I hear from them is if they report, they're never going to see that animal again. And what we have done to educate them is that was the same response when mandatory child abuse reporting came in. And the pediatricians said, we're never going to see these kids again, and that's a bigger danger. That never really materialized. They were still seeing the kids. So we go down that path to help the veterinarians know they're still going to come in. Just know how to report, know what to do. You're not being, the bad guy or the bad girl doing that. You could be saving a life. And I actually had a scenario with my cat's veterinarian, and this was when I was a prosecutor 20 years ago. And he was very hesitant to tell me something, but he said, I don't know what to do, but this client keeps coming in and the cat always has something broken. And I said to him, cats don't break their legs. Somebody breaks it for them. And he said, I know. And he said, I'm really hesitant. And I said, you're going to have a dead client if you don't say something. So he reported it, child protection and the police investigated it and uncovered horrific child abuse. And the veterinarian was very nervous reporting, but once, and I couldn't go into detail with him about what was uncovered until we actually filed the criminal charges. But I said, you actually saved lives, not just four-legged, but two-legged. You saved lives with what you did. And that was very brave. And so I like to share that story that, anybody who is in the field of protecting people or animals, we do it because we want to help them. We want to save lives. And sometimes you have to make hard decisions. So, having those mandatory reporting laws or even the discretionary reporting laws to protect them, if it turns out to be nothing, they don't certainly want to be sued for that. Those laws are important. So that's fantastic that New York has been progressive like that. Yeah. Is there any other tool that you want to mention?
Well, I would like to mention the fact that most recently, New York also codified a legal standard of what's in the best interest of the animal. There had been case law that had kind of dabbled in using that standard, but now it's something that is in play for domestic cases. What's important for that is we're taking away the element of kind of thinking of the furry or scaled four-legged creature as an object, as property, and really looking into what's best for the animal. And the reason why I want to mention that standard is maybe your state doesn't have that standard yet, wherever you are located, but there's a way to create and craft your case so that you can ultimately present that standard at the end and establish why the animal should be placed with your client versus the respondent or the defendant.
So does this standard apply to divorce cases, custody cases? Like where does the standard apply?
Yeah, it's now for domestic. I'll have to reference my article here. It's been a little while. Yes, it is for domestic cases. It's here we go. It was the domestic relations law. So
okay. Yeah, and I know that there is a movement in the animal legal world to recognize animals as sentient beings, that they are not just property. They are not a refrigerator. I mean, my cats have every emotion that I have. I mean, sometimes they have more than what I have. So they are truly sentient beings. They feel emotions, they feel fear, they feel pain. They are not a refrigerator. And a friend and colleague of mine, David Faber, he's a professor at Michigan State University, has been a leader in this field and has written so many law review articles on the need for the recognition of sentient beings and putting it into like criminal sentencing guidelines and recognizing that in pet custody cases, divorce cases, in the best interest of the animal, and really taking that into account. So I feel it's been a slow evolving area of animal law, but this is very encouraging to hear what New York has done to codify that. Wow, that is impressive. That is very impressive to do that. So,
and that was part of the reason for writing the article, was to get that information out there, to educate the masses. At least I hope the article could get out there to as many people as possible to understand the background of domestic violence and the intersection between animal abuse, and then create an easy to follow framework to identify if that's existing, and then what, if anything, you can do as a practitioner or even the general public. You know, it takes all of us, and everybody probably within their circle of a network knows someone or doesn't realize that there's someone who falls into that category. And if your community doesn't have a robust network, you can create one. And it's all about how practitioners be proactive, you know, go out there, meet some veterinarians, be involved with domestic violence service providers, and try to use what your community already has or develop places that really serve the needs of domestic violence victims and pets, which is what your project is trying to help publicize and make a true reality everywhere.
Yeah, and you know, I want to talk about things that, you know, attorneys can do to really, like, if an attorney is in a corporate law practice or estates and trust, or they're a prosecutor, or, you know, employment law, but they love animals and they would just love to have an animal law practice, but don't really know what to do. You know, one thing that I've always advocated for is, you know, first of all, does your state bar have an animal law section? So here in Michigan, we actually had the first animal law section in the country, and now it's really, really grown. And that's just a great way to get connected into the field and to know about all this stuff, to know the tools that are in your state. Do you have the protection orders? Do you have cross-reporting laws on the books? What is there in your community? And so, I'd like your feedback on, are there certain practices of law, first of all, that should be informed about how animal abuse links to family violence? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I come from a background as part of the Crime Victims Legal Network, which is an organization that's partnered with Empire Justice Center, Pro Bono Net, and the University of Albany. Through funding of the New York Office of Victim Services, we cull together information for crime victims with their civil legal needs. And where I see the overlap is everyone should be looking for this, no matter what field of law you're in, whether you're just a member of the general public, whether you're part of a specialized field being veterinarian, law enforcement, or a victim advocate provider. And where I would like to see people take the takeaway from my article is realize that you just need to be looking for it. You need to take off the blinders, put it on your radar. And when you realize that it's there are legal tools. And even if those tools aren't going to be something that will be successfully utilized for your client, you are helping them realize that that animal is being used as part of the power and control cycle, and helping to break generational situations where behavior and attitudes and ways of using animals are being perpetuated, so that you can stop that link. If you know about the link, you can do something. And if we all do a little something, it will result in big change.
Yeah. I just launched a podcast on protecting children and why reporting animal abuse, getting the non-offending parent or caregiver and the children and the animals into shelter can actually stop that cycle of violence for that child, because the studies are pretty shocking of what happens to children when they witness animal abuse. So yeah, I mean, absolutely, it's taking the blinders off. And I mean, in the field, we have been preaching that for 20 to 30 years.
Yeah.
Because when there is a call that there is a violent situation happening in a home, everybody needs to not only do their job, but they need to look. And so it's the EMTs. We're training them. Do you see a dog chained up outside? Do you see a catnip toy in the house? Right there, tell somebody there are pets here. And then the police, you need to know that there's pets there. Start, like you said, ask the questions. Start asking the questions. Are your pets safe? Have your pets been threatened? Have your pets been targeted? They need to ask the question, because as a prosecutor, and you could appreciate this, I would sit at my desk with my cup of coffee and my cat mug, and I would just literally wait for the police reports to roll in every day. They were the eyes and ears. I was the mouthpiece. I mean, if they did not tell me what happened, I didn't know. So it's helping them understand, take the blinders off and start asking about everybody and get it in the report. Same thing for child protection, get it in the report. Veterinarians, not just look at the animals, look at the kids, look at the domestic partner. Yep. If something feels off, it probably is off. And then prosecutors, getting them educated to not dismiss animal abuse as, this is not a big deal. I have a homicide case to deal with. Well, if you don't deal with the animal abuse, you may have another homicide case to deal with. And getting the judges to take it seriously, and probation. It's such a domino effect of getting everybody to stop doing the blinders and really look. So that what you said is so important.
Yeah. One other thing, the goal of my article was to cull together information, put it in plain language, create an easy to follow frame, but also expose people to become more empathetic, at least to learn about the importance of a bond, and perhaps step away from judgmental viewpoints and figure out how you can help. You can listen, you can help educate. Maybe a client is being gaslighted by saying that the animal abuse is really corrective disciplinary of the animal. Trying to help figure out what you can do to support a victim and their pet in order to help get them out of that dangerous situation, and realize that it's a journey, and that not everybody's at the same step on that journey. And what we have to do is just try to help support and do what we can to move forward with them and be there to provide options and information and resources.
And that is exactly why I launched Sheltering Animals and Families Together. It was a crazy idea that I had when I was literally in a judge's courtroom hitting barriers for a particular victim. And I just thought, this does not have to be difficult. This is easy, and we have to reduce those barriers. We have to eliminate the barriers. There should never be a reason that a crime victim with children and animals cannot get to safe housing. There should never, ever be that. And so, and it's making sure that everyone, I mean, it could be a neighbor, it could be, a crime victim advocate, it could be a judge. Everybody needs to know, do they have a safe place in their community for people to go with their pets?
And I'm very fortunate to be working for an organization that allows us to identify issues like this and provide tools to help everyone. The Crime Victims Legal Network, we are an organization, a network of OBS funded service providers and legal service providers to help crime victims with their civil legal needs. And there's a lot of civil legal needs that crime victims have. And it's really important to do what we can to help this component. And that was the focus of the article, is how can you do your part in breaking the link and supporting a crime victim? And that will help improve the holistic representation. Sometimes the legal system isn't going to always provide a perfect outcome for individuals, but how can we work through the system and not be re-traumatizing crime victims? How can you be a supportive person? And so educating your mindset. And that was an area that I had to learn a lot about. Trauma-informed prosecution, trauma-informed legal practicing, realizing the impact that trauma has on individuals and how it's widespread. And that was something that I'm very lucky that the Crime Victims Legal Network, I'm part of an organization where we're able to give legal resources, case strategies, research, provide information through webinars for civil attorneys who help crime victims. And we also, through our monthly forums, we're able to identify issues. And this is one of the issues that kind of came up in different ways. And so by taking that question and diving in from the mindset of, how do I reach the person that doesn't maybe have a natural connection to an animal? How do I, or who doesn't have an animal living in their life right at the moment? How do I help educate that person that this is an important bond? It needs to be respected. And it's a strong, motivating factor in people's lives. How can you do your part to help in this situation? Is it something simple like, if you know that there's an animal, do you help try to talk to them about safety planning? And if someone needs a safety plan for their animal, they need a safety plan for themselves. And make sure you go to a qualified domestic violence service provider to help do the safety plan. No one is asking you to be the end all place. You are just a member of a collaborative network. But you're on the front line to get information, and knowing when you access that information, how do you put them in touch with someone who can utilize their educational skills and their professional background to really make a difference of positive for the victim and their animal.
Yeah, it's knowing where to send people. It's the ultimate networking. It's nobody should feel like they have to know everything. Like, that's even what I tell the domestic violence shelters. It is not their job to become animal housing professionals. I'm like, No, you bring them in, and then you have an animal shelter or animal rescue partner that you can lean on.
Yep.
So it's knowing where to send people, who to recommend, but you have to know what your resources are and your tools are in your community and in your state.
And a lot of it is just knowing how to figure out where that framework is. So how, I guess, back to one of the questions you had asked earlier is, yeah, a trust and estates attorney can know about their domestic violence shelters. They can know about the other nonprofit public service legal entities that are in your state. Where are the organizations that can provide assistance? Whereas Empire Justice Center, we are a public service nonprofit law entity that we provide a 360 approach. We teach, we represent, and we try to change policy. And so knowing where the Empire Justice Center entity in your own state, these are all easy bite-sized things that you can do every day. You can learn a little bit of new information and just keep it in your back pocket, because you never know when it's going to come and be a huge impact in someone's life.
So just a bizarre question that popped into my brain. Can with the Empire Justice Center, do you have attorney volunteers that help out, that take pro bono work? Is that something that you all do?
That no, at this point, what we have are different teams that focus on certain legal issues that help marginalized populations. That's what we focus on. So right now we have the Crime Victims Legal Network, and what our role is to create the public website to allow victims to access information, and also connect them with legal service providers who do direct representation that are funded through the Office of Victim Services. The funding is so crucial to all crime victims. And then what my role as a regional attorney coordinator is, I support the attorneys that do the direct representation. I'm the one they come to, as well as my other colleague who is a regional attorney coordinator. We're there to be maybe like the third attorney in the background. We're the ones I can utilize my unique legal skills. I can find a good case that might help. And unfortunately, in a situation with domestic violence and crime victims, there's not always a good case out there. So it's more of, be aware of these cases. Here are some potential arguments that you can challenge the thinking in that case or distinguish it. And also we can provide information through writing an article like this, through webinars, and having an opportunity to just get information out there, because the more people know, the more chance that we can help someone. And if I can help one person through this article that I'm grateful that the New York Bar Association published. I mean, they published it online, and then they also published it in their hard copy of the May-June article. And knowing that it has the potential to reach so many people, and if they could just take a few minutes to read the article, my hope is that I've written it in a way that it's easy to understand. I'm hitting a few points, and I'm giving you tools that are now within your reach, and you don't have to be using them every single day, but when that opportunity comes, you know what to do.
Fantastic. All right, is there anything else that you would like to share before we wrap up here? Anything that we haven't covered?
No, I'm just trying to think. Well, I've explained about what the Crime Victims Legal Network does and how we're able to help crime victims with all of their civil legal needs, and the importance of having attorneys who are able to help with civil legal needs. And I've talked about Empire Justice Center and how we teach the law by providing training, how we also practice with direct representation on certain areas to help marginalized populations here in New York, and how we try to change the law through policy analysts. I think the other big takeaway that I'd like someone listening to the podcast and the article is realizing that learning about the existence of a pet in a victim's life means you're going to have to customize your strategy. You're going to have to perhaps change the way you're going to proceed on the case. And when you can address the specialized needs of your client, you can improve the holistic representation. And that's something that we can all do. We all know that we can't achieve everything through the legal system, but we can do our part to use the tools to the best that we can, make things hopefully even better, and try to support our crime victim clients with other tools within our community as well.
Well, that is a perfect message to end with. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So I'm going to share the links to Empire Justice Center and your Crime Victims Legal Network. And for somebody who is outside of New York, search for similar organizations in your state. They are likely there.
Yes.
Yeah. And you may even be able to find them through your state bar association. There may be a link there. So, certainly
Definitely.
go.
A lot of bar associations have an animal law unit. There's also family law units. Most, I think, if not all states, have some sort of component of a legal entity that provides help to crime victims. We, as a country, realize the importance of helping crime victims to try to make them whole. And there's a lot of funding, or unfortunately a lack of funding, to provide those services. But it's important because it's breaking generational abuse. It's breaking this intersect between domestic violence and pet abuse. So there is something most likely in your state. You just might have to look a little harder.
Yeah.
But don't give up.
Don't give up. Don't give up. So, Amy, thank you for being here, for taking time out of your schedule, for writing that article that caught my eye, and for being here to share what's being done in New York and really inspire what can happen across the country. So I thank you very much.
Well, thank you. And I'd also like to thank all of the people who wrote their articles, their books, the organizations that they run. Having that information was so crucial in my learning process. And then taking that information and trying to make it into something that would be an easy to read article, and making people realize that animals are such an important part of many people's lives. And whether you have an animal or not, you have to understand, or at least acknowledge, how that role governs someone's life, and why it really is a huge motivating factor for the actions that they take, and helping support crime victims.
Yep. I couldn't have said it better. Well, thank you very much. And this was a great message. And I'm sure it's going to resonate with a lot of people and keep the domino effect happening in this field, which continues to grow. So thank you very much. And thank you, everybody, for listening and watching. And we appreciate you being here.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.